And now we can begin a very, very interesting panel discussion. So we have for this session, it's going to be a panel discussion which will be moderated by Dr. Yamini, and there will be 4 panelists. And the topic is, do our interventions focus on results? We will be talking about the status, challenges, and the gaps. So Dr. Yamini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and welcome. Let me just go over the panelists as well. So for the panelists, firstly, we have Ms. Madhu Ketan, the integrator from Pradhan Institute. Second, we have for the panelists, we have Josephine Watera. She is the Assistant Director, Research Services, Parliament of Uganda, and board member of IDEAS. Third, we have Ms. Yashaswini Saraswat. She's the Assistant Director, DMEO Natiya Yog. And lastly, we have Mr. Tashi Dendep, who is the co-leader of Evaluate Bhutan. So we have a very, very interesting panel, a very diversified panel, and we're really looking forward to this panel discussion. Over to you, Dr. Yamini.
Thank you so much, Maha, and welcome everyone. And thank you for having us follow this really exciting masterclass from Soma. I think I'm still a lot of her concepts and words are echoing in my mind because it was so great to sort of hear those examples. And to everyone, this panel discussion is set up in a way to be both an extension as well as a bit of a, counterpoint in some ways as we think of practice. I think Soma talked about theories of change, gave such exciting, real world examples that also pressure test our own understandings of theories of change. And I have 4 excellent panelists who will then take us further into that journey and in some ways, help us, further either turn things on their heads, confirm what we think we know, but hopefully, shake up some more of our concepts, continuing with Soma's theme of saying, expect the unexpected, expect unintended consequences, evaluators, pay close attention to the field, be involved, be there. So this panel is provocatively titled, Do Our Interventions Focus on Results? And the panelists and I spent quite a bit of time trying to unpack and figure out what is it that the panel is intended to do. And I hope we deliver on that. Overall, laying out the objective that the panel brings together a diversity of practitioners and policy actors to really ground our understanding and thinking around theories of change in very pragmatic and practice-based perspectives. Even, extending that same to our definitions of impacts and results. So what, when you take interventions and theories of change off paper onto reality, what do we, what starts to happen? So let me start with inviting Madhu first. Madhu, you're a hardcore practitioner out and out, but I've also been a co-traveler looking at data and community data, especially, and being, a keen user of evaluations. So let me first just ask you, as a deep practitioner, how have you and your organizations and your communities that you work with, how do you think about results? And I'd really encourage you to bring in as many examples as you can of both social interventions as well as infrastructure interventions, and really sort of help us think about, unpacking what is it that results really mean for a practice-based organization like yours. Over to you. And let me just, before I invite Madhu, let me just ask everyone to please add your questions in the chat, because we're going to go through this as a discussion with 4 different panelists. I don't want you to forget your questions if you wait till the end. So please keep the chat live and active as you've done in the previous session. Over to you, Madhu.
Thanks, Yamini. And so I'd like to share, my own reflections being part of the organization that I work with, which is Pradhan. and both reflections as an individual, but also organizationally, how have we kind of looked at the questions that you flagged as the objectives of this session. So delving straight into what you asked, Yamini. I mean, for us in Pradhan, the meta objective is what constantly determines and keeps our nose pointed in a particular direction. And specifically, just to so that for the purpose of illustration for us, I mean, the meta objective is kind of movement towards a just and equal society. Now that's like a motherhood statement on at one level, but for us, I mean, that's kind of an overarching vision. Of course, the imperatives to move towards that have been articulated organizationally, but the along with this, I mean, for us, as we also were talking about in the earlier session, the process is equally important. And for us, the important part of the process is that women collectives have an enhanced sense of agency, and therefore the change process is driven by them. So that's something which constantly, kind of guides our strategies, guides our actions. So given this articulation of the meta objective, the individual projects that we may be involved in and the results committed in those projects are kind of all inputs into that direction of the meta vision. So we I think take pride in calling ourselves reflective practitioners, and therefore constantly learning from projects to chart out a path for the future. You asked me to share a few examples. So for example, our reflections from the SSG program showed us that and this is back in I mean, I'm talking about some 15, 20 years ago, when from the SSG program, it showed us that a gender neutral approach, even though it is co-owned and driven by women, does not take into account the embedded nature of gender inequality in our society, of which women are also a part of, and therefore they tend to also perpetuate those beliefs that societally have been exist. So therefore, the SSG movement, if it has to shift social norms and advance gender equality, has to factor in a conscious thread of dialogues and conversations around gender. Now, so this kind of even though I mean, so I share this as an example of going beyond the straight-jacketed format of typically looking at SSGs, and so are we kind of actually moving towards the direction of after all, what are SSGs meant to achieve beyond the immediate objectives of whatever thrift, credit, etc., and enterprise. So that's one example which I think has been for me personally has really been something which has shaped my own journey as a professional. The second also within that, I mean, also of course, while working on EVA interventions, one may also feel, one has felt actually the need to also rope in men as a constituency. So space to, space within the project to also accommodate changes like this. Another example, which, again, we've been, and something which we've also worked on together when Yamini, when you were in the foundation, is that the work on enhancing agriculture production showed the existence of, malnutrition even when production was going up. And therefore, leading us on the one hand to incorporate a perspective of diet diversity into the agriculture planning process. But also on the other hand, including, measurements of BMI levels of women and, balanced food consumption as part of, SDG program inputs. A third example, I'd say while, we were working on a project which was around enhancing access to information for improved grassroots governance, we realized that mere information itself was kind of nudging people towards a patron-client relationship vis-a-vis the state, a beneficiary. So fortunately, the program allowed us to build in an element of dialogue on citizenship and, how state functions, and which gave a, different perspective of citizens, therefore, legitimately holding state to account. So for us, while commitment to results is of course inherent in our fabric, but an agility or faithfulness to the overall vision is what determines, the course of action. So I think, many times structured project frameworks, of course, are important, but they may confine us to a committed set of activities, outputs, and outcomes, such that, we kind of lose our agility to respond to changes either in the context or the evolving, nature of the project interventions, because many things we may not be completely able to foresee. So therefore, the ability to maneuver ourselves so as to achieve the, desired results. And of course, all this requires the existence of, donors and other stakeholders who are aligned with this need to be responsive and the imperatives of, modifying, altering, broadening the project strategies and activities to some extent. Of course, keeping the original idea intact. I'll stop.
Thanks, Madhu. So many questions I could follow up with that. And I hope that our evaluators listening in are buzzing with questions like me, and will be listing them either on the chat or coming to us when we finish our couple of rounds of conversation. But I was just jotting down some very quotable quotes that you gave us. Let me move over to Josephine now. Josephine, shifting gears a little bit. You've worked with Parliament, you've been sort of trying to bring together both planning as well as assessment, which feels like a dream job and a dream sort of a connection that exists that we all would love to have. Tell us how that's working, and what are some ways that you've tried to sort of connect both implementation, intervention, program thinking, and assessment. Over to you, Josephine.
Thank you so much, and I congratulate you for holding this school in this season, and for all the presenters that have been ahead of us before we came into this panel. It's really great. You've set a pace. Dr. Soma has set a very great pace. And yeah, I've worked in the Department of Corporate Planning and Strategy in the Parliament of Uganda, that undertakes both the planning function, but partly the M&D function for the institution. But now I'm also under the research department, where we undertake evaluation, especially for government programs. And from what has come up, and it's important that we had the conversation before with Dr. Soma, that sometimes our planning in terms of the interventions and the results that we expect, we have a weak link between them. Because there are programs we still see when we've gone out to the field to assess them, that at the planning stage, they never even considered issues of theories of change. And so there's no clear path for us to follow to reach to the point of the results. And then there are times when we are struggling with issues of poor targeting. And I've realized that generally, I think it's a human kind of thing. We are not prepared for failure. So when people have negative performance, they tend not to want to report the negative results. And that's one of the conversations I want us to have, for us to know, and that's the reason we have some concepts that have come up now, like falling forward. for us to know that even negative results are results, for us to be able to pick lessons from there and do better the next time. Another factor that I think has been interfering between the phase of planning, interventions, and the results is an issue of baseline, where we don't have proper baselines and information at the beginning of the project or program, then we cannot know what we have changed. We cannot properly assess the results. And again, many programs, many activities that we've been struggling with as an institution, even at the national level where I sit on the National M&E Technical Working Group, it's an issue of baselines. Within the Department of Corporate Planning and Strategy, we're supposed to pick information from different departments and bring this together into one strategic document for planning purposes. And many times when you go to pick this information, the colleagues there tell you, how can I plan for number of sittings? How can I plan for this? So when you don't have the baseline for us to have a starting point, then we can't come at the end of the 5 years to come and now look for the results. Another challenge that I've seen is an issue of aligning the budget. And again, Dr. Soma touched on this, aligning the budget to the interventions. So we have, for example, in this country, the National Development Plan, and sometimes when activities have been put there, then the Treasury has not allocated funds, and then you're coming at the end of the day to come and assess the entire plan. But 70% or some activities, 100% of them were not even financed. So how do you come later at the end of the day to come and assess the results? So when we don't plan against the budget, it doesn't help. And then we also have an issue of sequencing and having a flow of our activities. The activities that need to come or interventions that need to come before we go into others. So we cannot talk about maternal health when we don't have proper equipment, we don't have enough health workers in the facilities, and then we want to come at the end of the day to come and talk about maternal health. These are some of the things that I see when I'm on ground. And then Dr. also talked about the issue of stakeholder engagement, which I also really want to emphasize, that if the people who are supposed to be part of this are not involved, and that's why we are in the era of SDGs, the decade of action, we are saying leave no one behind, nothing for us without us. If we don't bring the voices of the people who matter into the interventions, then we are in it alone. You come at the end of the day to come and ask questions, and people have no idea of what you're talking about, because in the first place, you did not involve them or bring them on board when you're doing the planning. So I want to stop here, but I just want to emphasize that at the phase of planning, it's important that we consider where we are going, we consider the journey. But many times we are so fragmented that the planning is happening somewhere else, and then the M&D team speaks at the end of the tail to come and assess the results. And so we need to have more conversations and more synergies between the planners and the evaluators so that we can talk about results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. Let me shift gears a little bit and go to Tashi. Yes, Sanjeev, love that quote, nothing about us without us. Tashi, I guess I want to go, maybe that's a good quote also to segue to you to say, as a young evaluator and as a participant, like, are there perspectives that you feel are missing when evaluators speak, or planners speak, programs speak, donors speak? There's lots of different stakeholders who talk now. And so what's going through your mind? Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Yamini, for being gentle with me, asking me the shortest question, knowing that I'm a newcomer in the field of M&E. As I represent young people in this panel, I would like to share my views as part of a younger lot. So evaluation, as we know, tries to measure results of interventions which are primarily designed to address one pressing issue or another, which also includes the issues that concerns the lives of young people as well. So taking this into consideration, I would like to make a few points here in trying to answer the questions posed by the moderator and also Dr. Sanjeev in the chat box. So the first one, whatever the program, project, or policy interventions that we try to design has indirect, if not direct impacts of varying degree on the younger section of population or the target groups. So this speaks for itself that both in design and implementation of the evaluation, the young people should be consulted, involved, and engaged to have our point of views to reflect and take care of the ground realities concerning the younger people. And the second thing, in most of the evaluations, what I feel is that we are represented by someone else, not ourselves. While this representation must have worked for few intervention evaluations, I'm sure that all of us would agree that this does not really work for all. For an example, in most of the projects on youth, funding and implementing agencies call for an evaluation of the project from a pool of experienced evaluators. I repeat, experienced evaluators. Then the evaluator or a team of evaluators goes on to design evaluation plans or whatsoever, putting into assumption and consideration that this would work in the field, but turns out otherwise later on. So what I'm trying to say is that had young people been involved in designing the evaluation plan or whatsoever, the context of the evaluation would be set right and the result not so bad. So in summing up, I feel that we are in some way not always bringing in the point of views of younger lots in evaluation, so to say. A common challenge that young and emerging evaluators like me currently face is the challenge of exclusion and underrepresentation, particularly in evaluation. Now that our evaluation communities and networks across the globe are now going strong in supporting and promoting the role of young and emerging evaluators, now it is the hope of ours that we will be involved, engaged, and entrusted with roles in evaluation to have our point of views point of views of young people in evaluation and policy making. So I would like to end for now. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Yamini.
Thank you, Tashi. I think you brought in a really critical element in terms of proxies and representation and who speaks for whom, firstly, and then this question of youth. I mean, I think when our planning call, we were talking about how, at least I feel pretty old, having done this for a while. And in some ways, even the terminology, the way, the concepts, I mean, there is a need for us to also continuously update ourselves generationally, not just in terms of complexity, but also in terms of age and what issues and framings are relevant to youth in the constituencies that we seek to serve. Tashi, there's a question at you in the chat, so go ahead and see if you want to respond on the chat while I move to Yashaswini. Hi, Yashaswini. Last question on this round of the panel, so thanks for your patience. Yashaswini, again, like Josephine, you're within government, you've probably been anchoring huge M&E efforts and have been part of many, and of very, very large scale programs. Do you, again, find that programs, especially as you start to look at the implementation machinery, the field officers responsible for the programs, laying out processes, trying to reach critical milestones, is there a focus on results, and what kinds of results is there a focus on? And I guess, you know, what's the, like, how do you think that focus can be maintained?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Yamini, for inviting me to join the panel today. I think this is a very interesting conversation that we've just started today. And coming to your question, firstly, I'm representing the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which is an attached office of Niti Aayog in the Government of India. Which has a mandate to do monitoring and evaluation of the schemes and programs of the government of India. So what I mean, as Dr. Soma had also mentioned during her session, that the focus of evaluations per se has to be on you know, it starts from outputs, outcomes, and then the impact. What we have often realized during the various interventions that we do, is that a lot of times the focus shifts to compliance of activities, and there lies a huge challenge where we need to constantly try to bring back the focus on the other three elements, that's outputs, outcomes, and more importantly, the impact. So DMU essentially tries to become a facilitator between the implementing ministries and departments in the country, as well as the funding ministry, which is the Ministry of Finance. We have a couple of activities which we try to bring back the focus on the results. So one is, of course, one of the activities relates to monitoring. So we try to what we've done is we try to develop indicators which are used to track the progress of different schemes under the ministries and departments in the government, and we continuously try to keep the implementing ministry or department in loop about the progress of the indicators. We try to bring on an annual basis we have meetings with the heads of the ministries and the other representatives from Ministry of Finance, wherein we talk at length as to what's happening with the schemes that are being implemented by the ministries on the basis of the indicators that we track on a regular basis, and based on that we try that. So based on that, there are some action points that emerge, and we follow up on that on a regular basis. At the same time, since the representatives from Ministry of Finance are present there, so we try. So they also try to implement that the insights that we gather through those conversations. That is also implemented during the budget making process. So there is sort of a linkage that we try to establish between the implementing ministries and the funding ministry, which is the Ministry of Finance. Apart from that, DMU is also involved in doing evaluations of multiple central sector and centrally sponsored schemes, and for that there is we depend a lot on consultations with relevant stakeholders from at each step. So be it the planning process of an evaluation study, we try to bring in representatives from the implementing ministries, from the grassroots levels, from the so DMU also has a lot of partnerships with think tanks, research institutions, global multilaterals, and so on. And we try to bring in a representation from all the stakeholders, which can give us a much better understanding in terms of planning the evaluation study while we start the process. Then even at different stages, as we move forward, so we try to internalize the collaboration between the private sector, the government sector, as well as the society. So we try to internalize the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar phrase that is there, and through that. Be it preparation of questionnaires, the tools for focus group discussions or the key informant interviews, we try to do as much consultation and collaboration as possible, so as to be closer to the reality. And again, these recommendations that emerge from the evaluations, we send them to those recommendations to the implementing ministries and departments, so that they have a better idea as to what can be done better in order to remain focused on the on results. So I think for now I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Yashaswini. Lots of questions for you in the chat. You can either respond to a couple of them on the chat in writing, but we'll do another round of a conversation and then come back. So I hope that you can respond to some of them. Let me go back to Josephine now, just picking up some of the threads, right? Yashaswini talked about how getting both reviewing monitoring data, staying focused on evaluation, as well as in terms of programs, sort of staying focused on results, because there's a lot of sometimes quite a slippage from outcomes to just compliance and reaching critical milestones, but not really thinking about, okay, does this in terms of having an impact sort of a perspective. So I think that's such a critical point Yashaswini made. And let me come to Josephine now to just give us a little more to think about on that front and say, can you, Josephine, could you think of some examples where you personally have seen how evaluation findings have been used to influence implementation? And what did that take? Like, how much of hand-holding and how much of work does that take to get translation of evidence into action and programming and program adjustments? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Yamini. And my response is going to also address some of the questions that I already see in the chat. And since we are here with Tashi, I'll pick an example that talks about young people. So in Uganda, in 2014, we designed a program called the Youth Livelihood Program. And the intention was to empower the youth to access skills, but also access basic income as startups for projects. And it was supposed to be a rolling kind of program. They're supposed to bring back this money. But now what happened, because it came just a year before elections of 2016, we struggled because the youth looked at it as a campaign, as something for them. So there's somebody else, that's the question of politics and evaluation. So they looked as a kind of a package for their participation in politics, if I'm to put it that way. And so the start of the project became problematic. Every time people went back to go and follow up and say, we need to recover this money, because the theory of change was looking at a situation where the money is going to be recovered and then rolled to another group of youths. It became a problem to have these youth bring back the money. Some of them never had groups in the first place. They just assembled because they saw now there's money available. So the concerns came through Parliament, through petitions from the youth in the public. They said, one, we are not accessing the money. Even when we apply, the processes are too long. Then the ones who had accessed the money, the ministry was complaining they're not able to recover this money. And so Parliament, through the Committee on Gender, requested for a full evaluation. And our Department of Research picked up an evaluation in 2016, a process evaluation, to see how the implementation of this program is. And when they brought in the findings, they presented this to the Committee of Parliament, Committee on Gender, Labour and Social Development, but also brought on board the ministry officials to come and share the results on what had happened with this project, this program. And so after 2 years of implementation, the design of the program was changed. There was a new way of implementing and executing it. They opened up for more youth. They improved on the issues of recovery because they trained, they realized that they needed to prepare these youth. So they trained them first before them picking projects that they wanted to put resources on. But also they tried to factor the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, but also local capacities of the youth in that community, so that they don't come and bring something new in a community which is more into a business community. You don't bring in it agriculture issues. So in a way, it made the youth, first of all, feel comfortable, feel like they can now identify with the project, with the program, and then they identified projects that are more viable for them to implement because there was something for them to work with. And again, like we mentioned, when you don't bring the voices of people who matter in the beginning, then it brings a problem. So it's at the point of this evaluation that when we're engaging with the youth and asking, why are you not, fulfilling your part, not sending back this money, then they were surprised for them, they didn't know that this money is actually supposed to go back. They thought that their groups are entitled to this money and that's all, you know. So when we brought this on board and informed the committees of parliament, they came and brought this on the floor of the House, and they requested for the change of processes and procedures. The minimums of how much a group can access was stepped up. Then there was the engagement of Ministry of Finance to allocate more funding then, so that the youth, the program can be spread across the country. And then there was also an issue of revision of how the youths can be the youth groups can be formulated, so that people who come from the same community are the ones who are considered, unlike those ones who are just picking friends from across different communities and then they had nothing in common. And then better preparation in terms of skilling them and preparing them to knowing that this money that is supposed to come back. So arising from this evaluation, we saw that there's better performance of this program. It has now been integrated into what we call the parish development model. But in from the results of this evaluation, we saw there's a shift and a better change on the implementation and execution of this program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Josephine. I think there's a joint paper you and Yashaswini can work on getting decision makers to use results and what it takes, and you know, how many different levels at which one has to continuously engage multiple stakeholders. I see that Sanjeev and some of the organizers turned on their videos. So I'm sure they're also thinking of all the papers that can come out of this that would be super useful and actually knowledge inputs for many, many evaluators in the field. Let me now turn back to Madhu. Madhu, you know, again, coming back to this question of an implementing organization, large community programs, where I think the vision you've laid out is that communities are not just seen as, you know, recipients of programs, and not only just as active participants, but actually it's their vision for change, it's their definitions, and you are kind of turning the entire power structure upside down and saying, like, actually, you know, implementers, donors, we become part of that vision and we are inputs into that broader process of change. So I can't tell you how exciting that whole picture you paint is to me. But let me come to a very mundane question that evaluators grapple with, which is data. You know, how do you use data? What kinds of data is appealing, useful? How can evaluators be, you know, producing more useful data for program folk, and how can that translation happen more effectively? Over to you.
Thanks, Yamini. So first, you know, Yamini, I'd like to flag the relative importance which is assigned to evaluation data versus, you know, monitoring data. So typically, you know, my sense is monitoring data is looked at, you know, as a younger cousin, and a lot more emphasis, I think, is laid on evaluation data, which is supposed to be more robust and, you know, I mean, objective also. But, you know, I mean, the timelines for evaluation data for an organization like us, which is, you know, into implementation, therefore the needs are, you know, more in real time. So, you know, so therefore, you know, having a robust MIS therefore becomes very important for us to, you know, learn well in time and to also maneuver our, you know, programs and activities, etc. So therefore, in the last, I think 5-6 years, we have tried to put in place a system for collecting data directly from communities by a, you know, group of around 1,300 women and these are all community women equipped with a, you know, smartphone or tablet and trained in the intricacies of, you know, data collection processes. You know, I mean, this was important for us because, you know, it was critical for us to know which program was making what kind of impact on program participants. And we also wanted to do this because we wanted each of the professionals in the field teams to be informed by what the data was telling them, apart from their own observations and intuitive understanding of how the change process was happening. So therefore, the imperatives for data for us are kind of, weighed more towards covering, large respondent pool, because the specifics therefore become very important. So each village, each group, each woman therefore becomes important, because for the professional, that is the universe in which they're interested. So, generally, I mean, sampling, etc. Although, those are also, I mean, statistics is a science, of course, but for the professional, the change in their own villages or with their own set of clients becomes very important. That's one thing. So how we've kind of, we've therefore tried to map a large set of, respondents. We've also tried to map shorter term outputs, and we also want to gradually put in measurement of longer term outcome level indicators as well into the MIS. To give some examples of how this is proving to be useful, one can see, how certain households continue to be left out of the, coverage of livelihood interventions. We can also see how incomes are changing or not changing also for certain sections. It also tells us of the complexity of change. For example, we've become curious about attribution part, which, is not so easy. So how much of the income increase is due to the inputs provided by the organization. But so one therefore, has to look at the overall household income kitty and what may have been a trigger in terms of, the program input, and therefore has probably led to unleashing a virtuous cycle, which has then led to, other kinds of, income impact in terms of, the generating an agriculture surplus, and therefore being able to invest into enterprises. So these things are far more trickier, and expectations therefore, are increasing of, generating answers to several of these questions, which I think, leads to my own personal reflection that, data has to be combined with other methods to give a really fuller picture, like, qualitative methods, direct observations, and, other kinds of participant discussion methods. So stopping here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Madhu. I think you spoke more like an evaluator, actually suggesting methods and different sources of data that one could use to triangulate. So thank you. And that's such great perspective. And I hope that, again, our participants can reflect more on this and come back with questions or even their own reflections on how they're sort of trying to triangulate different sources of information, but also address this challenge of timelines. Evaluation no longer can be something we do 3 to 5 years apart. The evaluative lens and evaluative practice is something that has to be continuous and ongoing. And at least, my own bias is also that it be very use-oriented. Madhu, there's a question for you in the chat if you want to look at it or come back to it later. Let me turn to Yashaswini. I took her permission to switch around her questions a little bit because there were 2 or 3 questions for her. Yashaswini, there's questions in the chat in terms of how much you are able to use MIS data, what's the quality of monitoring data in government, how are you, dealing with some of the potential challenges of that, and thirdly, what sort of data system strengthening of MIS do we need, especially on 2 fronts? One, the quality, but the other is what you talked about. Sometimes multiple departments need to be involved in this. So how do you harmonize that kind of a perspective? So over to you, Yashaswini.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the question. I think data is it's data and data quality both are very important when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. And DMU, because our mandate is to do monitoring and evaluation, we put a lot of emphasis on availability of good quality data, not just for our organization, but also for the public at large, to be able to understand what's going on with the schemes and programs that are getting implemented. So specifically, as I refer to the question in the chat box, for monitoring, we collect data from the implementing ministry based on the indicators that we form in consultation with the ministries uh, uh, with reference to the particular scheme and program. So this ensures that firstly that data is available for those indicators. If not, then the ministries try to uh, uh, to uh, uh, bring that the information from the ground, fetch that information. And secondly, this also ensures that um, that the quality of data is also relatively better. It is coming, the information is coming directly from the horse's mouth. So therefore it's also reliable. When it comes to evaluation, we try to utilize data that's available in the public domain through the different surveys, data that is available on the MIS of the implementing ministries, as well as data from the primary survey that we conduct from time to time based on the evaluation study being conducted. And at the same time, what we are trying to do is DMU as well as NITI Aayog at large is trying to put a lot of emphasis on converging the multiple data sources that we have and bringing them together, trying to put it together at the public domain, so that the data can be used. There's NDAP, that's a platform which which NITI Aayog has created, and we are trying to converge all the data sources, multiple data sources, and bringing them all together on one platform so that it can be utilized. And finally, DMU has also worked on something called the Data Governance Quality Index, which has a lot of emphasis on ensuring good quality of data from the implementing ministries, as well as ensuring that the ministries have dedicated good quality MIS systems enabled within the organizations, so that these issues of data quality get sorted out on a very fast at a very fast pace. So for that, we've actually done multiple iterations of conversations with the ministries. We started with building a questionnaire, and that was sort of a self-assessment tool for the ministries to understand that where do they lie, where do they stand at this point of time. We tried to share the best practices of the different ministries with so that they could borrow from those practices and become better. And we are also trying to we're also facilitating building of data strategy units within the ministries and departments, which have a focus primarily on ensuring good quality data based on different aspects that we're trying to capture in that self-assessment tool itself. So they have target years, target periods for them to sort of achieve certain milestones in terms of their data maturity. So these are some of the initiatives that we have tried to bring, and we do understand that it's a long way to go, but we are committed to sort of streamlining and smoothening the process of bringing good quality data, so as to ensure good quality monitoring and evaluation is done. And it's easier to do that. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yashaswini. And over to Tashi now. I guess as you hear the other three panelists and reflect on your own journey as an emerging evaluator, what are your reflections? What's the kind of data that you're going to be thinking about? And what kind of evaluations are you sort of planning, to sort of focus on? Would love to hear your perspective, Tashi.
Thank you. For me, basically, there are two main takeaways as a young and emerging evaluator or new evaluator, so to say. First one, as I said earlier, with the support and promotion by evaluation communities across the globe on young and emerging evaluators, such as youth in evaluation campaigns, there is an increasing interest and seriousness shown by evaluation communities and the organizations to involve young and emerging evaluators. This is very evident from some of the calls made on by evaluation, specifically mentioning that young and emerging as a mandatory evaluation team composition. As shared by Madam Kencho in the chat box, recently in UNFP Bhutan office has called for a young and emerging evaluator to take up one assignment. So when we saw that announcement, we circulated the announcement among our young and emerging colleagues happily, and then encourage each other to apply for it. So in fact, one of our members got selected as a young and emerging evaluator and who is currently working with UNFP for the assignment. So for this, we thank UNFP Bhutan for starting this, and we expect that this to be contagious so that other agencies join the race in getting us on board, and we will have something to contribute. The second takeaway as a new evaluator is that with these opportunities, I think with these opportunities comes responsibilities as well. Therefore, I feel that it's very important for young and emerging evaluator like me to step up, get trained, and be ready to accept what we have been long asking for. Opportunities such as the fall school is one way to learn, then network, and get ready for business. We asked for the opportunity to be involved as young and emerging evaluator in evaluation for so long. Now it looks like the evaluation communities has really hurt us, and now I must say that young and emerging evaluators like me should professionalize as an evaluator. So that's why I'm here as participant for policy evaluation for school. Thank you.
Thanks, Tashi. So I've been given the marching orders to sort of wind up in a few minutes, and I don't want to do that without at least offering 2 or 3 of the points that I feel like are key takeaways from this panel. I encourage our panelists to look in the chat box and respond to any additional questions that might have popped up. So let me just maybe try to have like 4 or 5 points. I try to do 3 or 5 so that it sticks in our minds. So the first one, I think that we hope this panel, at least following from the theory of change presentation by Soma, really sort of give the evaluators, participants, a sense of how, when you go take your programs and your evaluations and your theories of change off paper into reality, you start to understand what practitioners, what program participants, what funders really want to sort of focus on. And I think all the speakers here have talked about how, the focus is really on a very, very large vision and program of change and, and of transformation, whether it's social change, economic development, livelihoods, incomes. And in fact, discrete programs that are funded or come in through donors sometimes are really inputs into that larger vision. And it's really a lot of organizations that are deeply working with communities, governments, that are doing that translation of sort of, connecting all the different dots and sort of saying, here's how this program fits into these trajectories of change, and here's where they can interrupt or change exclusion. So that was my first sort of takeaway. My second one is that, goals and metrics and results are good. They're sort of our long-term goalposts. And at the same time, programs need to continuously be looking at them and need to really be breaking them down. And evaluators need to be continuously thinking about what are some of those near-term, medium-term, longer-term vectors of change. Even as Soma said, we expect the unexpected. There will be unintended change, unintended consequence. So, put that into your theory of change, but really sort of try to bring the analysis back to the results that you're thinking about, but those results as defined and redefined by program practitioners as well as the communities, and youth, like groups that are generally not really taken into consideration when we do our stakeholder mapping, especially when that program is a bigger program. A third one for me is that this whole thing about systems. I think a lot of conversations now talk about systems change, that we need to be thinking about systems when we look at measurements and programs. And I think this panel again reminds us, much like the previous presentation did, that change is not linear. Systems predate our programs. And so evaluators, feel free to get into some of that messiness of reality, that messiness of understanding, what's that big picture, where, what has been happening before these programs, not just as a baseline. Baselines are important, I think, as Josephine said, but at the same time, in that, track that big process of change, try to get at that vision piece, because I think that's the piece that really will help us explain change and what matters and what's worked and what hasn't worked. Finally, I think the focus on multiple kinds of data and this deep sort of desire of practitioners for evaluation systems that don't just offer detached sort of, long-term change stories. Also important, impact is important, impact evaluations are important. Let's not lose sight of that. But for understanding, there's a deep desire and hunger among programs implementers to understand data, to work with data. So, feed that hunger, think of evaluation designs and results and methods and approaches that are beyond sort of the big picture evaluations, to really think of more building in more concurrent monitoring, more concurrent sort of nested pieces of data collection, nested pieces of ground realities. I love that Soma said, going field trips and going to the field is not about just going and talking to somebody. Evaluators should be in the field to understand what that change looks like. So invest in observation, invest in how communities are defining both the programs, are experiencing it, and are actually redefining some of those results. And let's bring those back to our results frameworks and to our programs. So with that, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this conversation. I enjoyed it so much. I think we could go on for another hour. But with this, I thank all our panelists. I thank the organizers and hand it back to Maha.
Thank you so much, Yamini, and thank you so much to all our 4 panelists, Madhu, Yashaswini, Tashi, and Josephine. This was such a rich discussion. You branched out to different topics, aspects, data, quality, MIS, the process, embeddedness of all of it. So this is so great. This was the kind of thing that we wanted to conclude on, and absolutely, you've basically nailed it, all of you. So in the interest of time, very interesting moment. Again, we want to capture all of it. So I will request all of you to please turn on your cameras so that we can take a group picture and capture this moment. This has been so great. Today is the end of day one, and 2 more days to go. And I'm sure, as you can see, that this was such a great 3 hours that you wouldn't want to miss. I don't think that I should be talking so much about attendance, because this is so great. Why would you want to miss it, right? So I think let's just quickly capture this. We've got we would love to see your faces. You're joining in from different parts of the world, not just Asia Pacific region, but really around the globe. So we're so honored and happy to see you all, and to have you here. We're just gonna take some screenshots. You can do that too. This will be posted on our Twitter and LinkedIn profiles. So production team, I'm going to count till 3 so that we can have big smiles. And this is going to be a sign of how much you like the sessions. Okay, so really teeth to teeth, molar to molar smiles. 1, 2, and 3. Please capture. Great. I think we've got some great pictures. Hopefully, Madhuka, we're good.
No, requesting you to stay.
Okay.
Keep your video on, because we have 4 pages.
Okay. Yes. So because it's a big group, we have 4 pages. That's incredible. Amazing. Just let me know when you're done, and we can stop smiling then. Okay, great. I've got to say that you've got all the pictures.
Karshan, you are also.
Yes, Madhukar.
Okay, we are done. Thank you.
Okay, great. So again, thank you so much to all our speakers. Thank you so much to all the participants for staying with us, for learning with us. And we shall see you tomorrow, the same time, 3:30 p.m., 3:30 IST. The session will begin. Of course, I don't have to say this, but I will, that attendance is mandatory for all 3 days. You can follow us on these Twitter handles, and we have posted a lot of the event coverage on Twitter as well. So see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.